Good morning, all, and welcome to the BlackUSA.News morning show. My name's Donnie Glover, and I'll be your host. Well. It's almost a holiday. A lot of people are traveling. We pray that you have traveling mercies. One of the guests we've had on the show throughout the year has been Dr. Michael Zollicoffer, and I'm reminded that family is the number one spreader of COVID. So as you get together with family, we want you to have a good time. But like the Dr. Zollicoffer said, if you don't live with them, they need to be in one space. Everybody can get together, but you got to wear your mask. And those that came together need to eat together and leave together. But all of that mixing, COVID is real. People are still dying. Young people are dying. Old people are dying. People who've never been sick are dying. COVID is real. Michael Randolph, you are the top person, always saying good morning. Top of the show, top of the hour to you, Michael Randolph, down there in Tampa. We know you miss Santana. I bet you they don't cook dressing like we cook it up here. I'm looking for some oyster dressing, by the way. I think I'm going to have to try my hand at making some oyster dressing. Haven't had none in years. But today, folks, we're going to talk about the city of Baltimore. And I want to talk with a couple of leaders who've been leading for some time, because I'm just personally not satisfied with what I'm hearing out of City Hall. It's ridiculous. It's not making sense, and things are not getting better. So we had to call, and I'm just going to say it, an elder statesman, my big brother. He's been a leader. One of the main reasons I called you, it came to mind last night that we need, considering how many of our young people are off the hook, and you have tried it. This came to mind last night. We need a military school in Baltimore City.
Well, certainly we need a good school, and military can be one option. But we do need a school, and I have these conversations with others almost last night too, that we need a school of discipline and values, and that the young people know who they are and from whom they've come. The young people don't know this generally across the city. They don't realize their own greatness and the greatness from which they've come. And so taking a life, unfortunately, means nothing, because they're killing nothing and no one, rather than knowing that great person standing next to them who comes from, and not only that person, but themselves. They don't even see and know themselves how great they are and from the greatness they have come. And so their value of their lives is not worth very much. And they're thinking that whatever life they have is going to end in 20, 24, 25 years anyway. No one, mostly these young people, don't even see themselves into adulthood, let alone understanding who they are at the moment. So a military school is a great option, and but schools of great discipline and value are also.
You've never killed anybody?
No, sir. No, not even thought. Well, let's say I've thought about it, that not seriously thought
You've
about
never
it.
stood over somebody and just emptied the clip in somebody.
No,
And I'm 56, so I guess you like 60 or so. But
at least.
okay, but you've gone 60 years. Look at the countenance on your face. But you grew up with, you served communities where
Right.
people you grew up with have been locked up 20 years.
Well, I've known obviously folk who have served time. I've known men, particularly, who have killed. I've known people, but I don't want to sound like an old guy, but I do know people who have killed, but still respected life. That might sound weird, but they, in their mind, someone had done them wrong, or they had been a part of a holdup or something, and someone died or intentionally. But they still respected life. They still taught me and others to respect life. In other words, whether that thinking is clear or not, unless you had a legitimate beef with somebody, you didn't just kill someone. Uh, and again, their thinking may have been distorted in how they figured out who deserved to die. But yeah, I grew up with people, not grew up with people, but I did know people who had served time and had killed. But they still had a respect. And they certainly had a respect in my day. And again, I'm not going to sound like an old guy, but I am. So in my day, folk respected elders and they respected children.
Let me just cut you for a second. We've been joined by Lawrence Bell. And Lawrence Bell, we've reached out to you because you two, in my mind, are the last of the elders. You're the last of the statesmen from my generation, because I don't know what we have right now. When I look at City Hall, I'm disgusted. I'm the talk shows, the interviews, all of this is meaningless because the things that I thought we were working towards as a city mean absolutely nothing in today's currency. What is wrong? How do we fix it?
Well, hey, listen, thanks for allowing me to join in with my good friend Carl Stokes. Good to
Good
see you,
morning.
Carl.
Good morning,
Carl,
Brother Lance.
Carl and I still talk quite often because I think, Carl, you and I look back on the last so many years, and it's really sad that things have regressed the way that they have. I think that there's a lack of a sense of urgency. I think that, and I'm going to be totally honest, I think some of our leadership, or a lot of our leadership in the Black community, has chosen the wrong role models. I remember a time, and Carl, I know you and I can agree on this. I think that, we didn't always agree on everything.
Right.
But people that we knew in leadership, you, me, and some others, even if we didn't agree, there was not a question as to whether or not you cared. We might have a different opinion as to how to get things done. And sometimes you might say, well, look, I don't know. I don't agree, but let's try your way. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, let's try something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
we did do that.
Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I never questioned whether you cared. You didn't question whether I cared and some others. Today, a lot of these so-called Black leaders, I question whether they even care at all. The horse trading, which has always been around, has gotten to the point where now people, I heard somebody talking about a leader. I'm not going to mention his name. And I said, well, why doesn't so-and-so do X, Y, and Z? It would be good for the community. That's where the people are. And the person said to me, well, I think he's playing the long game. In other words, you're looking solely at playing it safe for your career over the long term, rather than being motivated by what's in the best interest of the people. And I think that there's a lack of sense of urgency. I think that you hit the nail on the head. The respect for life has really plummeted out there in the community. And I also think that we're not trying new and different things. I mean, I'm going to be very honest with you. When I hear a police commissioner say, and he's not the first one that's done this, but he says things like, well, we're going to just keep working with the community. Well, we're going to just keep working with the community. Well, we got to get bonds with the community. Well, obviously you don't know what to do. All right. Let's keep it real. All right. You're not articulating any kind of plan or strategy. Even a mediocre strategy is better than no strategy at all. And to me right now, that's what we've got. There's no real strategy. On the street level, things are going crazy. The clearance rate for these murders is like in the 30 percentile, somewhere in the 30 percentile.
A 13-year-old girl. Is it rocket science to find out who killed her? This is not the Russian mob. This is not the Italiano mob.
Right.
This isn't Interpol or ISIS. This is some people around the corner.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, in my neighborhood, right down the street on Gwen Falls Parkway, about 2 months ago, a young man was stabbed to death, and I was on a call. Somebody called me up about it or texted me, and I went outside, went down the street, and he had just been stabbed to death. Now, I know people know who killed the guy. Okay, I know the last name of the person, although it's a family. Okay, I know the last name, but the first name, there's people that know. I mean, a lot of people were there. And yet, I wonder why the police don't know, you know? So we got a long way to go.
Yeah, that is crazy. Lawrence, you and I and Donnie, I'm not as embedded on the streets with a certain generation as I used to be. But for the most part, the three of us can go out on the street, or we can make 3 or 4 or 5 phone calls, and we'll know by the end of the day who did what. Or we'll be very close to it. It's because we're embedded in the community, and the community will talk to us easily. As a matter of fact, the people will talk to the police easily if they didn't think that the police would talk to the thugs, and that grandma would be killed. And and the police are going to knock on grandma's door, and they're
expose her,
right, and in obvious ways, and then the killer, the perpetrators are going to knock on grandmother's door, and they're not going to threaten grandma's life, but they're going to threaten grandma's grandchild's life. You do it again, I'm going to get Bobby, and we know that. And the other thing is that the police are not embedded in the community.
No, they're
obviously.
Not.
If
no,
the police were embedded in the community, they would know what's going on. And so when the police say day after day, we're going to work with the community, obviously they're not working with the community because they don't know. And I know, and again, sounding like an old guy, I know our cops, Lawrence, Donnie, I know our cops knew almost what we knew, maybe more than we knew. They would come up to us and they might even admit, I know who did it, man. Can you find out blah blah blah? And I didn't have any problem talking to my cop, right? And I knew which cops not to talk to also. But the cops are not embedded in the community. And it's a lie to say that folk in the community will not talk. Folk in the community will talk, but they don't want to talk to a crook and a crook in blue.
Lawrence Bell, I look at the police commissioner Harrison, and it's almost like he has I'm just here to get a check. And I'm not criticizing, but you can see he doesn't know. It's like Stevie Wonder at the wheel.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think, and Carl, you hit on a very good point. It has been known for years that there's been a major integrity issue in the Baltimore City Police Department for years. And maybe it's gotten even worse. And so, you go to some places and, see on the street, people out there selling drugs, and you hear somebody say, hey, 5-0, y'all, 5-0. And they clear out before the police even get there.
Right.
These kinds of situations where there's talking going on the street level with somebody over there is notorious in Baltimore City. I tell you something I was thinking about. I was thinking about a year ago, no, more than a year ago, when Trump was still the president, and we know what a racist he is, but he said something that was kind of tickled the ears of some of us when he started talking about the corruption in Baltimore City. And even though his motive was really screwed up because he is a racist, some of us heard that he may have been tipped off that really there is a lot of corruption in Baltimore City. I mean, much as we don't like to admit it, okay, it's in a lot of different departments and agencies, but especially in the police department. So I think, Carl, you made a very good point. I've talked to people that there's a lot of people who know the exact cop that killed Freddie Gray. He was in Western District. He was well known to be a racist, and many of the black cops in Western refused to even work with this guy because he was known to be a racist. People know exactly how Freddie was murdered, which the infliction happened before he even got into the van. But the question is, And also I understand that HBO was doing this piece on Suda that was killed. All this is
No.
going on, but you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
hear
yeah,
people
yeah,
come
yeah.
forward. You know what I mean?
They tried to say it was suicide, and we know damn well a black man from DC would not go take his life in a filthy West Baltimore alley.
No, there's no reason to do that. I mean, so clearly, and by the way, every time you do hear about a integrity problem in Baltimore City, it's always the feds that step in. If you notice that the feds are doing an investigation, they tell the commissioner, whoever the commissioner is at the time, and then they jump out there and make this great announcement. But it's never because of internal affairs. It's never because internally they're investigating what's going on. So I mean, that's one of the big issues. And I don't know why it is that I'm gonna be honest, that I wish I was the commissioner could get paid like that. I mean, I really do, man. He gets paid pretty well. And Carl, here's a question. Why do we see so often that we're hiring these commissioners from out of town and we're raising their salaries so high before they even get here? There should be some kind of way of putting people on some kind of a probation, right? Give them 6 months to find out what they can do, and if they don't do the job, let's move on.
Get them out of here.
Right. No, the greatest ripoff, and you know this, Lawrence, you've seen it. The greatest ripoff of the taxpayer dollar is to have the low bidder be awarded the contract, but because of changes throughout that contract, they actually become the highest bidder at the end of the day. They bid low, but then they bring in change orders every other week and say that, the cost of the pipe that they thought was $10 went up to $20. And so they bring the city a bill for $20 for the pipe instead of the $10 that they bidded it at. Meanwhile, the guy who bid at $13, we told him he couldn't do the job, and he would have been the true low bidder had we looked at the quality. And, sometimes we got to tell these change orders, no, we're not going to give you the $20. You bid $10. It's on you. We're not going to give you the $20. But it's automatic every time they come. And beyond that, there's just a lot of crookedness in many of the bids. If we want to check something, check those bids and who gets the bid. And the bigger thing for me, Lawrence and Donnie, is the fact that when we don't enforce the minority, quote unquote, set aside piece of it, because a white contractor says, I can't find anybody qualified to do the job. Now, how does that make sense? How does it make sense that there are no black contractors or subcontractors or construction workers or electricians? It's a lie. How is it so that there is no qualified folk in this town who are black who could do the contracts that the city has bid out?
Let me say something. One thing that, Carl, you're absolutely right. And during the brief time that I was president of city council, I saw occasions where the prime contractor would say that person's not qualified. That the black over there, he's not qualified. And then when we investigated and got beneath the surface, we found out that the black subcontractor, whatever he was doing, whether it be electrical, concrete, or asphalt, or whatever it was he was doing, he used to work for the prime.
You're right.
He worked for the prime before that. And so now he's bidding himself as a prime.
Right.
And unless you investigate and check it out to see, they'll pull those kind of games. I'm going to tell you something. And, I've said this before. One of my great heroes was Maynard Jackson in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
And Marion Barry in Washington, D.C., who said, we're going to use black people to build the center downtown, the athletic center.
Right.
And Maynard Jackson said, we're going to rebuild or we're going to expand the airport with black people. And he caught hell for that. He's in Georgia, and they really gave him hell, But it can be done if the will is there. And I cannot understand why, for the life of me, that we've had black faces in high places. But as you said, we're not doing any better in terms of that.
You're right, Lawrence. And a lot of folk, I think you said this earlier, they just don't care. They don't care. if you look at the school system, for example, and your mother was a great educator, but if you look at the system right now, people can't care. Children, we have 13% proficiency overall in the school system. Now, people cannot care about Black children, and the problem is some Black leadership that obviously doesn't care. The murders that are taking place every day in our city. Obviously, some people, as you said, in high places, Lawrence, just don't care. They can't care. They can't care. I was going to say like you and I, and I'll say that. There are people like you and I, and there are thousands of Black people in this city who care and would give everything they have. But there are some people who every 2 weeks get a paycheck, and that's good enough for them. Or, as you mentioned, someone mentioned to you, they're playing for the long game. Well, the long game is here. It's right now. You can't talk about the long game when 300 people are being killed in every year in Baltimore. You can't talk about the long game. The long game is right now. We've lost at least 2 generations of young people in schools that are playing for the, quote, long game. People give us fixes for a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, or no plan, and we need a plan for this weekend. We need a weekend plan. Let's staunch it.
Sense of urgency, and I'm gonna tell you something else on that, Carl. I want to commend you on the outstanding work you did with the School for Young Black Males. This is a perfect example. Okay, now I remember the school board challenge you on all these administrative things here, there, everywhere. The bottom line is that you have young Black males who are going on to college.
Right. That's the bottom line.
The results. How you get there, I don't really care that much. However you get there, if you need additional resources, if you need additional help, the role of the school board should be to help you, not to criticize you, not to knock you. And I'm gonna tell you, that's also why I think that we need to really organize, because next go around, we've got to get some African-American people and some Black males in particular to go down to these places like the school board and demand that they do the right thing, and like I said, it really concerned me. And by the way, it's another issue I want to kind of throw out there. One of the problems we're dealing right now with COVID is I feel that there are city officials who are exploiting COVID. All these meetings are closed now, school board, zoning, transportation, planning. City Hall is still closed. They don't even let you come in with a mask. And so what we're seeing right now in the city, and I don't think it's only here in Baltimore, but at other places as well, where they are, but particularly here in Baltimore, they are exploiting COVID restrictions because they want to make decisions on people's heads that they know people don't want, that are anti-democratic, and that they have no way of accessing because they closed everything down clear into 2022. So I think that some of these decisions they're making, now again, you and I have talked about this whole issue with the COVID money that's coming into town. Was it $600 million some odd dollars? We need to have a plan for the Black community. We need to use the money for what it supposedly was intended for, and not have it diverted for pet projects for some of these people who are just trying to gentrify and move Black folks out of the city. But for our voices to be heard, we've got to demand that the city have open to the public hearings. A lot of our people don't get on the internet like we're right now. Okay, a lot of our people don't do Zoom very well and so forth. And even if you can do Zoom, the moderators are blocking people from being seen. So we've got to address that very soon.
You're right, Lawrence, absolutely. And the city is closed is ridiculous. I mean, you're going to get a bad water bill. You're going to get a bad water bill. And you can't even come downtown and argue with somebody about your water bill being corrected. You can't even have that conversation. And look, nobody's in the offices for the most part. You can't even talk directly to somebody when you call. You get an automated system, leave your name, we'll call back, blah, blah, blah. It's just, you're right, Lawrence. They are hiding from the citizen using COVID regulations as the rationale why they can hide. They're not in the office. They're not in the office physically. They're not in the office by telephone. Folks just aren't there. And
Gentlemen, I have a question for you that only your perspective can solve. We have a Black mayor. We have a Black city council president. We have a Black comptroller. We have a Black state's attorney. We have one of the highest percentages of Black elected officials in the city. Mr. Bell, you just referenced Atlanta. They've had a Black mayor for 40 years. When you go to Atlanta, there's the expectation that the head of a department, that the head of a company is Black. Why isn't it the same here in Baltimore? Why is the Black community, East Baltimore, West Baltimore, Park Heights, still suffering?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues, lot of ways to unpack that. I can talk about a couple of them. One of them, I found that in Atlanta, Georgia, partly, I guess, because of the history of civil rights and the like, there's Black leadership that keeps the political Black leadership, it keeps them, what's the word I'm trying to say?
Accountable?
Accountable, right. I'm sorry. Got a little early morning slowness here in the head. But yeah, they hold them accountable, all right? I've heard stories of, when you had Maynard Jackson, you had Andrew Young, Bill Campbell, I'm talking about going in the past,
The lady?
on into the future. The Black ministers would often call them on the carpet. I've heard stories they called some of these guys on the carpet after Maynard left about issues in the city. You could not get away with having majority whites department heads in Atlanta. You couldn't get away with it, okay? There's certain things, expectations. So because you had a strong, in fact, the group is called Concerned Black Clergy of Greater Atlanta. I used to go to their meetings. I used to do a radio talk show myself. One day I'll tell you the story of that, how Black ministers in Atlanta actually got me to do the morning show on CBS. I got the call, and because they had a Black conservative on in the morning, right, that they didn't like. Originally, C. Miles, you remember C. Miles?
Yeah.
It was here in Baltimore. C went back to Atlanta where he's from, and they started this new Black talk station. And he was the guy to start in the morning. He was very popular in Atlanta. They brought me in to do 9 to 12 at night, every night. But C got ill. He had an aneurysm. And they replaced him. He was liked. They replaced him with this real right-wing Black guy who was well-known on TV. The Black ministers couldn't stand him. They went directly to the radio station and said, you got to get rid of him. And I found out, I got a call that said that they also told him, we want you to replace him with Lawrence Bell. I knew nothing about it. I got the call. I'm like, wow, I get to do the show. Because I had interviewed a lot of them, and they liked me at that time. But the point being that they carried a lot of weight with media. They carry a lot of weight with the politics as well. Also, I would say like the Black business community as well. Now, I think that's not as much as it used to be. And one thing I remember Maynard Jackson said to me, I got to meet with him. He was my hero. I'm glad that I got to see him before he died. But he said, Lawrence, one of the problems here in Atlanta, he said, is the new Negro. He talked like that. He said, the new Negro. And what he was saying basically is that there was a civil rights mentality in Atlanta. Coming back to Dr. King, Maynard Jackson, Andrew Young and others, okay? And there was one here in Baltimore at one time. But what has happened, well, in Atlanta, you have a lot of people coming in, they want to floss, they want to flex, they want to be, housewives of Atlanta, all that kind of garbage. And then they forgot how we as Black people got there. And that's an unfortunate thing that's going on there in Atlanta. And hopefully that's changed it back. But here in Baltimore, there was a time when the Black clergy and others held us accountable. I call times when they would call us on the carpet, I remember times Vernon Dobson, Reverend Dobson, when he was alive, he called me in City Hall. Said, I want to talk to you, Perrin Mitchell would call me sometimes,
right,
because he really cared. And so, and I respected those people. I really respected those great leaders. But many of those kinds of people who kept people accountable in City Hall, they're gone. And I don't know who's doing it now. I don't know. Maybe Carl, you may know more than I do, but I don't see it right now.
No, we don't have the same folk. We don't have the same activism. We don't have the same accountability. You're right, Lawrence. People would call us up who weren't, quote unquote, not necessarily in our realm. I mean by that, we get a call from a non-politician, a community leader, or a pastor, or business person, or someone else would call us up and say, "Hey, Carl, hey man, what's going on over here? Come over here. I need to talk to you. I need to have this conversation with." And we were not insulted by getting those calls. We weren't insulted. I can't hear you, Donnie.
I think you're on mute, Donnie. Oh, there you
What
go.
happened? What happened to Baltimore? Like Atlanta, you know, a lot of our churches, a lot of our community people moved to Randallstown,
Right.
moved to Towson, moved to Essex. But how was Atlanta able to maintain their cohesiveness and we haven't? What happened to us?
Well, I'm not sure how cohesive we were, to be quite frank with you. I mean, there were.
Well, Baltimore is this. We have the second oldest NAACP branch in the country. Thurgood Marshall came from here. Noah P. McMillan. Thurgood Marshall was good friends with mentee to Charles Hamilton Houston. I mean, Baltimore. You go back to Isaac Myers with the Ship Caulkers Union. Frederick Douglass came through here. Harriet Tubman came through here. What in the world happened to us?
That's true. Baltimore is historically blacker in terms of achievement and progressiveness than most anywhere in the country. And you mentioned our early leadership, and I somehow the generation that we all are on the edge of or came from has you know what I found out recently? I found out that the young folk, Black folk, who call themselves by names like progressive, who are doing nothing progressive, and I'll get shouted at for that. But Lawrence, you were progressive. Donnie, you were progressive. I was progressive. We changed the city council to include Black people. Remember, there were 3 districts in the city.
1991.
Had no Black representation. Nobody who lived in Morgan Park had Black representation. No one who lived in Northeast Baltimore, no one who lived in Cherry Hill and Edmondson Village were represented by Black officials. Do you remember that, Lawrence, that we had to vote on a whole new redistricting plan so that Black Melvin Stooks and Joan Carter Conway, all of those people didn't have a chance at being elected officials until Lawrence and I and Vera Hall and some others changed the map. Sheila Dixon changed the map so that it could include folk today. Lawrence, something you said earlier is sticking in my head. I've repeated it already twice. We've got Black people playing the long game. The long game, meaning they want to extend their careers. Now, Lawrence and I jumped out of where we were in very safe seats to run for, and we were friendly rivals, but we jumped out of our safe seats to run for leadership positions in the city. Both of us could have lasted 20 years in the council, but neither of us saw the folk that were leading us being the answer to the concerns of Black people in this city. And there are now men and women of color who are sitting in safe seats and won't dare challenge the status quo because it would not be safe for them to do so.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that the propaganda that has been pushed in our community over the last so many years has really, in my view, corrupted a lot of our young people, okay, in a lot of ways. And I say some stuff, it may not be popular, but I don't mind saying it. You know, this whole hip hop mentality where Black people act like they're teenagers for life, it bothers me. I don't hear people in the hip hop community, I'm going to be very honest about it, okay? And because I think that much of it is, nearly all of it is financed by people outside the Black community to keep us acting like children instead of grown men and women. I'm going to be very honest. I think that the selfishness, the self-centeredness, the do your own thing mentality, the social mentality, our organizations have degenerated to basically being social organizations. And that's happened. It's not only here, I've seen it around the country. And even some of the old civil rights organizations. and I can name them because I've seen some of them on the inside. What happens is the quality of leadership deteriorates. Now you have social climbers, status seekers. They only get into it for what their resume can get, which is why one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of blacks come together on a lot of issues, because a lot of young black professionals think that, for example, it's more prestigious to work for white people. You'll notice that they will break their legs to work in a white corporation. I talked about this down in Atlanta. You know what I mean? You see Koreans, South Koreans come here, many of them very well educated, but they will leave a corporate job in South Korea to have a mom and pop shop here in Baltimore or New York or DC, any major city, because they understand the importance of ownership, black ownership, black people working together. That has gone in large measure to a lot of our young leaders. I'm gonna be honest. And what happens in these organizations is that the organization started off one way, where you had real people who were real leaders, who were, I think, really anointed to be leaders. And down the road, you get people who are only in there for the title. And the people who are only in there for the title are self-perpetuating. This happens in a lot of groups. I'm a name groups like the NACP, groups like Urban League, groups like a lot of groups, okay, on high and low levels. And so what happens is it becomes a social club. These people propagate themselves, and nothing ever gets done anymore. And I see that happening a lot here in Baltimore. You're right. We were willing to put it on the line. Now nobody takes any risk at all. They have no agenda. And again, the problem is that the people in the community don't even know this because nobody's telling them. The news media is not going to tell them, except for Donnie Glover. We don't have the ministers telling them that. We don't have, who else do we have out here now that's sounding the alarm?
Let me pose this to you. Right now, as you well know, Channel 11, Channel 13, the Baltimore Sun, they tend to work together. Channel 11, Channel 13, the Baltimore Sun. Then you've got Fox. And then you've got the black press. Well, you got, independent media, Baltimore Brew, but also the black press, the Afro, WEAA. But Fox does more news hours than the other stations. Now, all of the City Hall hates Fox. Right. Because Fox asks too many questions, too many provocative, prodding, probing questions. How come the 1311 Baltimore Sun, how come they aren't asking those questions? Because not all of the questions that Fox is asking, not all of the questions are bad.
Yeah. True, Donnie, but in this very partisan atmosphere we have politically, if it's said by certain media, the other media will not pick it up, will not even mention it. There are some good stories about corruption and fraud in some of our institutions in this city, specifically education. But the other stations and the other media, because the right wing has mentioned it first, they won't acknowledge that there is such a story going on. They'll totally ignore it to the detriment of the black community, because this is affecting black children and the black community, and they just won't do it, Donnie.
So let me get a little more into this. Recently, I don't know if you saw it, but Fox is they're looping a clip featuring Peter Franchot. He's saying, that's why I like you guys. He's embracing Fox 45 in Baltimore. What impact will that have on the governor's race in June?
Well, I'm not sure. I can't predict that, but I can tell you that Fox News is watched by more black people than any other station. I've seen the data, and it's an interesting thing because I think that 13 and then 11 were super popular in the black community. And the data now suggests strongly that the Fox station is the most watched station in the black community. And I think mainly because they're oftentimes, whether you agree or disagree, and I disagree often, whether you disagree or agree, they are more in the community than the other stations are.
I think that's a good point, Carl. I kind of suspected that. I haven't seen the numbers.
They
And
do more hours.
clear.
They on at 4 a.m., 4 p.m., all through the weekend. The other stations are slacking.
Yeah, I suspected that. I hadn't seen those numbers, but I can believe you because I think you're absolutely right about that. I think, let me give you an example. There was an article that ran in the Baltimore Sun about the lake, Jewett Park Lake Drive. I can look out my window here and see it. There was a survey, so-called survey done by the Transportation Department of Baltimore City that got 187, I believe it's 187 people that they surveyed to say that everybody wants the street to be reduced to one lane on both sides. Now, that's ridiculous. I can say anecdotally, I think over 90% of the people hate it, passionately hate it. And yet they cherry picked people. They did an email blast and they got the people they wanted, most of whom are not African-American, most of whom don't even live anywhere near here. And they then released this as a press release with our great mayor on there saying, yeah, well, people want this, okay? It was obviously a fraud. And when I was on the line with transportation, I said, was this a scientific study? I mean, is this scientific by any stance? I mean, do you do a sampling? This is what I heard from them. So here's the thing. Now, they did this. Then a reporter at the newspaper runs with this because clearly she is involved with this circle of people that want to do this. Okay.
It's
recently,
it's really
on one
PR.
of those TV stations,
it's not news, it's really PR, Lawrence. It's not news, it's PR.
Exactly. Now, recently, last week, there was a story that was done. I'm not going to mention the reporter. You probably know what I'm talking about. And I've known her for a long time. Out here, right here in the corner, talking about the traffic out here at Arkansas and Glens Falls. Now, clearly, there's some kind of agenda there because this reporter knows me very well, knows that I live here, knows that I have a business downstairs. I went outside, hey, what's up going on? Oh, we're doing something about traffic here at this corner. Now, people
Sounds
I know,
like Jay Miller.
I'm not going to name the name. But here's the thing, and I respect the reporter, but the point is that too often, I don't know if it's the news director, assignment director, whoever, they have already a preconceived storyline that they send reporters out on, okay, to push a certain agenda, unfortunately. And we're seeing a lot of that happen. And so, like Carl said, I think people are turning to 45 because they do go after people. And I'll be honest with you, I never liked media. Nobody likes media beating on you, okay? Nobody likes that. But it does keep you honest. And if you have a conviction in what you're doing, you can go and talk to them. You know what I mean? I don't like, I'll piggyback on that. I don't like certain political leaders now who don't go to community meetings, who are ducking. And we've seen a lot of that lately. I mean, Carl,
none of City Hall
you and I,
with Fox.
we had to go to every community meeting.
None
I
of them
remember
like
my
Fox.
side of town, Carl on the east side, on the west side, when Sheila Dixon and I started back in '87, Sheila and I together went to every single, that's one thing I can say. She and I have had our differences, but I've never accused her of being lazy or not on it because Sheila and I went to every single meeting and we took heat, but it made you a better person. You know what I mean? And really, in a lot of these communities, even if it wasn't my fault, I couldn't get angry at the people because they're frustrated. And I had to listen to them vent, take the heat, and say, okay, what are we going to do to try to solve this problem? That's the way leadership is supposed to act. And many of these folks down in City Hall are not doing that today.
Mr. Stokes, your turn.
Right. Donnie, I agree. And and I forgot about that, Lawrence, that we did go to every meeting all the time. And it's amazing. And I'm just going to take a shot at state leaderships who almost never went to meetings. I almost never saw a state senator or a state delegate show up at a community meeting, and which was okay. I got that out, off my chest. But you're right, and look, it extends past even the media because we hired an inspector general who people get mad at because they do a scientific and investigative survey, and then they report the facts. That's all. The IG doesn't say you're wrong. I'm going to indict you. You should go to jail. She doesn't say that. She says, "Here's what I found, and do what you want. You can take the next step. I don't have the power, authority, or desire to take the next step." And now she gets a board appointed who evaluates her and can fire her. And half the board have had investigations on them by the IG, and people don't like that. What happens to the IG reports that come out, once a month, if not every 2 weeks? They go on a shelf somewhere because the truth is meant to be hidden, apparently. And I'm not saying I disagree or agree with the IG, but her job is to investigate and then to give a report. And politicians, apparently, and others don't like her reporting what she discovers.
One important question for both of you gentlemen: is the consent decree working?
I don't even know what the hell the consent decree.
You mean the police department?
The consent decree, which stops police officers from arresting people from loitering. It gives them a lot more to go through when it comes to arresting people for drugs, or they catch somebody with 2 pounds of marijuana and they get down to central booking, and the state's attorney's office says they're not prosecuting it. They let the person go. I'm trying to figure out what's up with the state's attorney and what's up with the consent decree, because it's not working. It's murderous on these streets. A 69-year-old woman was stabbed to death in church, something not typically associated with the Black community. We do a lot of things in church, but killing people or burning down a church is just not one of them. And then the consent decree, going back to Freddie Gray, I see people slinging rock, dope, and coke in front of the cops watching a crap game.
You know what? I don't know exactly what's going on with that consent decree. I do think that there's some police that are using that as an excuse not to do good policing. Right. I believe that you can be sensitive community without not abusing people, abusing Black people in particular, and you can do your job at the same time. And that's why I've often said over the years, and Carl, one of these days I'll write a book about my interactions with our former mayor O'Malley. Often the people who know this real story, we fell out a lot earlier than the media claimed that we fell out and all that. And it was over that issue of hiring. I always felt that we could recruit more young Blacks, male and female, who have the right attitude out of the military and other places to replace some of these bad apples that we have in all these police departments around the country. Okay, if somebody doesn't want to act right, I just think get rid of them. I don't believe that the sensitivity training and all that kind of stuff goes that far. People who are really racist need to be removed. Right. But then at that point, you got to police. You got to do the job. And I think that the state's attorney, I think, is well-intentioned. The problem is that I don't see where cutting back on enforcement of certain crimes is making things any better on any level. And I'm gonna be honest with you, and I'll tell you something. Sometimes I like to say I'm man enough to acknowledge when I think I've made a mistake. I remember, Carl, you remember this years ago, we had the law about panhandling.
Right.
And I'm one of the people that I'm gonna be honest, 20 some years ago, I was opposed to it because I felt that this was an effort to enable the abuse of poor people in the street. As I look at it, looking back,
poor Black people.
I'm sorry.
Poor Black people.
Poor Black people. But in retrospect, I do believe there needs to be some kind of action to stop people from panhandling on certain places. Because I think
Mr. Bell, I got white addicts in my alley with
it's
needles.
Becoming a part of it's becoming a culture, and I'm gonna be very honest. And I don't want to sound like one of these right-wing freaks at all, But at a time when we have all these jobs that are being listed right now, okay, right now, it's not always that way. I think there's something wrong when you have people panhandling in front of every single convenience store in Baltimore City, every single gas station. I see two. They're not there right now, but I can look out my window and there are two white folks right out here at the corner of Arbitrary and Gwynns Falls, who have been panhandling. They claim to come down from Pennsylvania. We've gone over to them, asked them, look, why don't you leave? That's disrespectful to the neighborhood. They got belligerent, nasty. They've been there for months. And I can't get the police to do anything about it. We had a meeting, and the guy that's the community relations guy in Weston said, well, yeah, we know about it. We talked to them, and,
Well, Fox don't see them. They see the squeegee kids. They don't see these white addicts in my alley dropping needles. They don't see
right
it.
here. And they supposedly offered them help, and they didn't want the help.
No, and they talk smack. They talk smack back to you. I can be wherever I want. You panhandling, but you greasy.
Yeah, well, I think we need to deal with that. We need to use social services to help people. People are homeless. We need to deal with that. If they have other issues, if they addiction issues, we need to deal with that. But the city right now, I just think it's falling apart in so many different ways that we got to address. I think also that, and I think, Carl, you understand what I'm saying, is that some of the solutions of our white liberal friends are not really helping Black people. Black people need ownership. The reason we're in a situation where we don't own the businesses, we don't own the houses, we don't own anything, so we're vulnerable to all the economic ills. We don't just need a temporary handout that's not going to get us anywhere. And that's my concern, even on the national level with the what they're talking about right now. I want to see more Black contractors, Black businesses get government business so we can hire each other, so we can get out of this rut,
Right. As I said earlier, since I already walked down this path, let me keep myself in trouble. The white progressive agenda is not about Black empowerment. It's not about Black people. It's not about economics. It's not about employment and contracts and ownership of businesses. It is not about that. It is about reducing Druid Park Drive to one lane and having wider lanes for the bikes than for the cars. Now, I'm not an anti-bike guy. I'm not an anti-bike guy. If you want a bike, fine. We'll make highways and byways, but you're right, Lawrence. The people who are in your community, Lawrence, telling you what kind of traffic patterns you want, don't live in your neighborhood. They pass through your neighborhood. They have their agenda, and they don't even ask you, Lawrence, and the community, what do you want in your neighborhood? Because I hate to say this, but they have their white privilege, and they are showing you their white privilege even in your own neighborhood. They're showing you that their white privilege, even though they don't live in your neighborhood, is more important than you who live in the neighborhood and your thoughts and your opinions.
Well, you know what? I mean, this is what
are racist too.
Right. This is what Malcolm X talked about years ago. I used to read a lot of Malcolm X and listen to his speeches, but I don't think I totally internalized and understood as much as I do now what he was talking about. He was talking about, the wolf and the fox. The wolf is the Donald Trump, the Klansmen, these white supremacists that are just out and out killing Black people. They right up front. We don't like you. At least they're honest about it. But on the fox are some of these white liberals that claim to be our friends who are using us. And what's something that's interesting about that? There's a lot of talk about critical race theory and the like. But, one of the elements, I'm not an expert on it, but the man who actually created it back in the 70s, or the concept, his name was Bell, by the way, no relation to me. He was an attorney. And one of the elements, and I can't remember the name, maybe somebody listening will tell us what this is again, but he talked about the fact that we only move forward on race things when it is at the same time a benefit for somebody else. I don't remember. I had to Google critical race theory, and somebody can do that, and I know what I'm talking about. And it's interesting is that theory, which is one of the four, I think, main points of that, is really more of an indictment of the white liberals. That's the irony about it, because what it's saying is that, in effect, he said that if you go back to the civil rights movement, all the way back to Brown versus Board of Education, all the way back to a variety of, well, the 60s, for example. This is what Malcolm was saying. You know, we had folks who were well-intentioned coming from the North, white young people and others supporting voting rights and all that. But the Democrat Party got the major benefit because Black people voted Democrat, right? And I'm not saying we didn't get benefit as well, but in every case, today example, you have all these people out there marching last year because of the killing of George Floyd. They crying crocodile tears. All these mostly white people demonstrating, okay? Some of whom I think were well-intentioned. But guess what? They have our vote for the white liberal establishment in the Democratic Party. Now, what in turn are we getting out of it? And again, Carl, you know this, Donnie, you know this. We are the largest group or pocket of votes within the Democratic Party. We're about a third, okay, nationwide. But do we get a third of the benefit? We're bigger than any other group. We're bigger than the white feminists, unions, LGBTQ, all these different groups. And yet we get the least. And then you look at, and that's why, again, I say with this bill, I see a possibility that they're going to siphon off this money. Why aren't we using the money to rebuild these houses around here that people need, to get Black folks to own their own home here in Baltimore City? Why aren't we doing that? You know, instead, they're talking about siphoning off the money, claiming that they're reconnecting Black communities, which is ridiculous. And they want to take that money to carve up the street over here. They're going to create almost like a gated community for white people. They're carving up North. They've already done it to North Avenue. Everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. So why is it still happening? That's the question.
Right.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking time out of your morning. Any final thoughts before we go into this? And by the way, the Indians, if you got Native American blood, they would not say Happy Thanksgiving, but any final thoughts?
I just hope, you know, we're in a heck of a time right now, Donnie, and I'm just glad, and I don't give the Thanksgiving for the Native Americans being, pushed off their lands. And speaking about looting and stealing, I think that the Europeans came over here and looted and stole the Native American land, traditions.
In the name of manifest destiny.
Yes, in the name of manifest destiny. But I do want to be thankful that those of us, and I lost my mom this year, but those of us who can still gather around the family that we have, and be thankful and grateful that most of us have made it this far so far.
And we thank God that we at least had a mama, because we know some people didn't have a mama at all.
That's right, brother. That's right.
Well, amen. I agree with you. I had to speak on my birthday, which is November the 14th. I had to speak at my cousin's funeral. His name was Johnny Bell. He passed away from COVID. And I'm thankful family came together, but I do want to encourage everybody to take it very seriously. He did not, I'll just say that there's some people that didn't have to pass away from this disease, especially now. And I just want to say to people, be thoughtful about it, be careful. Be thankful that we're all here now, but let's pull together and really be careful about the future.
And let me just add, stay out of people's 3 feet space. You ever talk to somebody and they keep coming forward? It's like, dude, 3 feet.
Thank you, Donnie. We thank you. We thank you that we have an independent Black press represented so well by you and just a couple of others, but we're so thankful that we have an independent Black press.
We need you.
We need you too, big brothers. Happy Thanksgiving to all, and we'll be back tonight at 7 p.m. Have a beautiful day. Good morning, world.
Good morning, Baltimore.